Are there any questions? Stunned silence. It's impressive. Scott?
Yeah.
You have one? Hold on.
Thank you. So we've heard quite a bit about evolving standards and new standards, which will make it easier to find video content. And I'm trying to point out into the direction a few years. Is the objective here long-term that maybe not in, before the next IPTC meeting, but sometime in the measurable future we will increase the amount of searchable video content to the point where all of the PBS content since the beginning of the world and everything else will be generally searchable using the metadata standards and available in digital format? Are we going? Or is that where we're looking? Is that what we're looking at? Is this why we're doing it?
I think what content owners choose to share is up to the content owners, basically. So there may be people who don't want to have their content searchable by others, who want to be on the phone making sales calls, or just keep it in-house. But there are so many new applications and new routes to market for content that and such a demand for professionally produced content that it seems likely that it would be an advantage for these things. And within the archive community, there's what economists could class as market failure. There are maybe $2 billion a year generated by archives, cost about $2 billion a year to maintain these archives. Less than 1% of people's collections are sold every year. So what's happening to the other 99%? Is it being kept for posterity, or is it just very, very hard to find? So I think there are lots of opportunities, but obviously it's down to the content owner what they choose to do as well.
I mean, a big part of the motivation and the argument for generating funding from CPB and from grants for the American Archive of Public Broadcasting and in public media is that an enormous amount of public money went into creating this content, and therefore the results should be available to the public. So I would say, as far as we're concerned, yes, the goal is to, because it's publicly funded, it's a little bit different, and obviously there are some who will choose not to participate, and some creators and rights holders who will choose not to make their stuff available. But I think the goal is to get as much of it as possible available and searchable and accessible. And yes, there is a market failure on behalf of these smaller content creators to sort of take advantage of the fact that they are sitting on a repository of content which could be used to generate profit for them as well, in addition to making it available. So yeah, I would say that what you have described, at least as far as we're concerned, it will take many years, but that's the dream.
Yes, I think we are not far from this. If you look, for example, most of the platforms like Vimeo or YouTube, they generate automatically the time text for you and propose it to you, and you just have to approve it. And they can store it, and you can search for it. So for several of them, they offer it already. So if you search in Google, you find them based on the time text, which is inside the servers. And it's not so much; it's just an index. So we can reach this state in a few years, that everything is searchable, which users have uploaded in the net.
Well, thinking about your question, Scott, I was thinking about, are all photos currently searchable, and primarily by which platforms? So if I think about videos, I think I see quite different sources for such searches. Look at organizations or companies like the BBC. So they all have a tremendous set of videos, but maybe not publicly searchable. Yeah. And on the other hand, you have YouTube. You are interested to get metadata you can instantly and easily process for internal purposes. YouTube has an API which may be used for this purpose. So if you have their, let's say, consistent upload and transfer of metadata. So only to mention, a conclusion from the discussion with Stefan in the morning was maybe we should add a mapping to the APIs of different organizations or platforms like Facebook and YouTube to our mapping. But I think it's also a little bit of different interests of those who have video and want to share it, and those who are the platform holders and want to make it searchable. So I think this also needs a little bit of reconciliation, I guess, these two approaches to metadata.
So, hi, Evan Zanos from the New York Times. One of the things that I do at the Times is oversee our digital archives, at least the digital archive, well, some of them anyways. You said that people are sitting on stuff they could be making money from. Could you elaborate on that? Because I'm curious what potential you see.
There's a lot of opportunity, and can I say, first of all, you're doing a wonderful job with the New York Times covering the election. Excellent job. I pay my subscription. I've done a lot of work with archives over the years, and also looking at studies through Focal, one of the trade associations for back catalogue archives, and there really is there genuinely is market failure. I mean, there are people talk about because a lack of digitization, lack of searchability, discoverability, lack of understanding the technical characteristics of content. You know, can this shot fit into my HD production because I'm just looking at this little browse, thing on screen. So all these questions are problematic, and we've done some studies that look at. It looks like a 4-to-1 ratio that if the market is for every $400 in the market, people are achieving $100 right now. So and it's not because of the quality of content. It's nothing to do with the content. It's to do with those three issues: digital access, searchability, and being able to find out what you need in order to embed it in a new workflow. And I think also it's sometimes the working practices of organizations. There are some organizations that are really against allowing their potential B2B customers search their content. They want to be able to sell to them online. I've had grown-up conversations with several archives who just fly in the face of this. They genuinely believe it's better to put out teasers and have somebody make a phone call, but people these days don't make phone calls. One example I came across as well, the guy running the LA office of one of the UK's large broadcast archives had a phone call when CSI was still, alive, saying, do you have any 1950s boxing footage? And, great, CSI wants a 1950s boxing. Yeah, we have loads of it. When can you get it to me? In 6 weeks. Well, no. Yes, it's CSI. And, the difference between a Hollywood minute and New York minute is New York minute is right now. Hollywood minute is right effing now. So, that's not the answer. so sale lost. But I think that the more people agree to share this content, there will be services and there will be new opportunities. But our sense is it's a 4-to-1 ratio right now.
I mean, I will say that I'm always surprised when I come across broadcasting organizations, broadcasting archives that don't save their raw footage because of the stuff that that generates us money or that we find the most value. And the reason that WGBH, putting on my WGBH hat for a minute, has such a robust archive and a pretty strong archival staff is because we personally find so much value in both reusing our raw footage and putting it out again for reuse to other organizations. So I do know that there are broadcasting houses that don't save their raw footage. They only save the finished product, and that always seemed quite startling to me because the raw footage, those uncut interviews, those things that go into stock are really where much of the value is.
This is Bill Kasdorf. I actually do have an actual question this time rather than a statement.
What are you suggesting?
No. Compared to what I did in the last session where I actually didn't ask a question. I made a statement. This is a two-part question for Rolf. It's somewhat meta question, but in this process of verification, is there a way that you have to certify that something's been verified? And a variant on that is there any kind of standard way of describing the extent to which it's been verified, because I imagine there are different levels of completeness or thoroughness of verification. That seems to me ultimately of interest.
Yes, there is kind of a best practice by journalism, and it's kind of a traffic light. So they estimate the certification from green to red, in 5 steps. And the process is that we have a tool, for example, the forensics, and it says, okay, it looks suspicious, so it's, let's say, kind of yellow. And it offers you this, but then we have always the user in the loop. The journalist has to decide, and they say, okay, I look at these materials, and it's, let's say, light green, So, and we collect these estimations, and finally we have a final estimation of it, and we put it in our newsroom so that in the workflow we can see, okay, this materials look good, it's could nearly be publishable, and this looks suspicious, we don't take it.
Are these defined and documented anywhere? The reason I'm asking is that people in other industries would find that useful.
Yes, we are in the beginning. So in some newsrooms, they use this system in-house, so that they have this estimations in the big newsrooms, because a lot of people working on this, and they do not want to verify it again and again. And I think some of the footages have comments and have kind of certification levels. I think also YouTube, Vimeo, they have, but it's only sometimes filled out.
But it's pretty much specific to an organization rather than industry-wide?
At present, but exactly this is a goal we have with this project to have it for the whole world. Let's say together with the rights information, kind of certification information.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, just so I'll make the statement, not the question. Just a comment on Pam's and probably an answer to Evan. Yes, there's a lot of value in. There's a lot of content out there that's not being monetized. I think it's and there's a gold mine, especially evergreen stuff. I mean, whether it's the New York Times or the BBC or all these news organizations, they have stuff that I'd like to look at going back 100 years. But the trick is technology to make it easy to discover, easy to search, topic-based semantic search, tools that we're still working on. But all the stuff can still live and be monetized. There's a gold mine out there of content, video, text, you name it.
And I will add, just building off what Pam said about the need for open source tools to do that kind of work. That's something that we're very invested in as well. The work we're doing is for that older stuff, the stuff that doesn't come with transcripts, where transcripts weren't required or closed captions weren't required for broadcast, to try and figure out ways that we can automate that transcription and entity mastering. It's why I asked the question earlier for that massive amount of content that until recently has been kind of locked in physical formats and has not been digitally accessible and digitally searchable. And that is becoming easier and easier all the time, but we're not quite, I don't think, there yet to where we can wave the magic wand and have everything become searchable with a couple of buttons pushed.
I think we're probably not that far. It's give and take. There's always a gap between what's happening in the commercial world, what's happening in science. But it takes something from each side, and in some of the best science right now depends on content. You can't have a system that learns if it has 10 hours of video. It's crazy. With our small internal group of people who have a wonderful success at getting their IEEE papers published, and I think it's because we have 40 terabytes of content for them to go play with. So, but you do need that content, and people need much more. I would think with the New York Times news organizations, you're going to face detection should really be completely comprehensive. But the science is at a stage it can't do any more without content to play with, and make sure that's accurate.
Well, on that point, sorry, I just want to respond real fast. First of all, I totally agree with you about more data equals good. In fact, there's a gentleman tomorrow who I met yesterday who will be giving a talk about an algorithm that he helped train on data that the Times released specifically for the purpose of improving, giving NLP researchers something to work with. 20 million articles. 20 years worth of data, 1.7 million articles. And also, to paraphrase what I've heard from the panel back to you, just to make sure that I'm grokking it, There's value in your archive, but you're never going to get it if you can't find things in your archive.
Okay, I have the last question apparently. Well, we'll see. So I'm Stuart Miles from the Associated Press. My question to you is, what is video? And so to expand on that a little bit, a lot of what we have been discussing today has been, I guess, file-based video. Is there any relevance to this to, for example, streaming content in the sense of like live streaming? What about things like virtual reality, 360-degree photos, and so on? Is it any kind of moving image, or is this really applicable to more of a subset?
I think it's all video. I mean, video it's kind of a bad word semantically now. It's been used in so many different ways. I think it's 80% meaningless in a way. But I see it as really any moving image. So that can be any of those things, and certainly the metadata transcends type of content. It's my opinion.
Yes, we are very much focused on the news, and therefore the request is to be very fast. But usually we need at least 15 minutes for the process because we have these analysis tools, and people have to look at it. So we generate the metadata from the video, from the fragments. We annotate them, and this needs some time. So there are algorithms, and we have also algorithms to look at the pictures inside. They don't look at each frame, but at least at each key frame at 10 seconds or something. So we need, let's say, 5 minutes. We are 5 minutes back if we have a live stream, and then have people to look on it. So we need 15 minutes, but this is usually enough for the news show, but not for real live video. So we had already the request in live TV shows to annotate and to use the annotations in the studio, but I think this is not feasible. The quality is not good enough.
I will say I absolutely agree with Pam that I think that everything that we've been talking about is applicable to all forms of moving image content. But I think that, also I'll agree that the standards also need to evolve with it. So a standard, like Michael was saying, is not a fixed thing. You don't just walk away and say, well, we've done the IPTC standard now, and now it's good. I mean, that's what, I was trying to convey a little bit in talking about our journey with PB Core. If you walk away in 2011 and say, well, it's good, it's not done. Things evolve. I think all of us will be working as things go on to incorporate more terms, more controlled vocabularies, more ways to describe the newer kinds of video you're talking about that are just now starting to be kind of created to such an extent that standardized terms are becoming necessary.
Just to mention, the video metadata group discussed the difference between static files and streaming, and the conclusion was the only difference is in fact how to associate for streaming media the metadata with the content, and this needs to be investigated. So, are there ways to embed it, so to have some pseudo frames holding metadata? Or is there a way to associate, to say, actually you get two streams, one is the pixel stream and the other one is the metadata stream?
I have a question for PB Core. One just side question. You have PB Core on one side of the Atlantic, you have EBU Core on the other side of the Atlantic. Is there any communication between you two, or what kind of redundancy can we expect from both organizations? That was my first question. My second question is related to the number of encoding formats. As a news agency, we are providing tens of formats every day, which means a lot of encoding device and a lot of time which is spent there, a lot of storage which is spent there just for encoding multiple formats. So is there any effort in trying to standardize and get squeezed to two?
Well, I think I can answer one question much more satisfactorily than the other. The first question, yes, we've been partnering with EBU Core, and we've been working with them, as I mentioned, pretty closely to try and I mean, there's always going to be redundancy as long as those two standards exist, because both standards came from a very similar source and a very similar impetus. Both of them were kind of built out of Dublin Core, which is a very simple standard for bibliographic metadata to try and allow for better description of moving image content. And they developed in slightly different ways, but there is a lot of overlap and a lot of redundancy between them. But I believe that EBU Core is sort of more focused now on semantic and linked data. They still have an XML standard. It's still usable, but as far as the information that they put out and where their attention is, it's very much towards linked data and the semantic web. So we're working with them so that we can map PB Core to EBU Core linked data in the semantic web, so that if there's a forward path in that direction from PB Core, it goes straight to EBU Core. It doesn't go off in a different direction. So we're hoping probably in about a year to publish a mapping that, a guideline for going from PB Core to linked data EBU Core. But we'll still be maintaining XML PB Core for backwards compatibility and to allow the organizations that are currently using it to continue using it in the format that they have been using it in. To answer your second question, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint Pam, because the decision that we came to when we came to our controlled vocabulary list for digital formats was not to support it anymore. We didn't feel that we could do it justice to the number of standards and formats that are proliferating every day. It's changing constantly. It required more energy and attention than we felt we could give to maintaining that list. So while I do believe there is some work being done in trying to standardize what formats are being accepted, it's really driven by the market. And it's not something that we feel it's our role to resolve in determining what standards are being used for broadcast and are being used for exchange.
So what you're saying is, rather than hoping that there will be fewer, we should prepare that there will be more.
Yes.
I think it's kind of predictable, though. It's actually fewer in terms of formats, because the formats themselves are consolidating. So ISO-based media file format is a really important wrapper format, and it's the one that should wrap almost all known media. It covers everything. There's a lot of work in the standards community about with the new codec. So we know H.265 and or HEVC, and then the VP9 and so on. But there's a lot of work going into JavaScript based video coding, because as processors get speedier, it might be possible not to have this complexity. I think also some of the licensing authorities that have really sort of had a stranglehold on encoder makers, encoder algorithm writers over the years, beginning to loosen their grip. So it is getting a little bit more open, but we're going to go through more complexity before it gets simpler. I think just my only what I'd say is maybe sort of look to software-based and cloud computing-based tool sets, so that you can be more flexible for change in the future.
I think that's a wonderful closing statement, being flexible for the future.